In 2011, I made my first ever feature-length film. It cost $5,000. And depending how you ask, it turned out anywhere from terrible to amazing. But can you really make a movie for only $5,000? In this video, I'm going to share with you the secret sauce that allowed us to do it. Me and my dad had wanted to make a feature film for a long time, but we didn't feel adequate. We didn't feel like we had enough skill because a feature film is a big project. And so we'd spent years working on smaller projects in order to get the experience we felt we needed. But sometimes you just can't have all your ducks in a row. You can't have everything accounted for, and you're gonna feel unprepared. Sometimes you just have to jump and build the airplane as you're falling. And so we decided to make a feature-length film. But before you can have a movie, you have to have a script. Thing was, we really didn't have that much experience writing. We're gonna head over to my dad's house because not only did he produce the movie, he also wrote the screenplay. Okay, so the first hurdle was, how do we come up with a story? Because we didn't have one.
We were looking for a futuristic dystopian world in which we could get a story out in which we see the way the world's going now.
I remember the exercise that we did had us look in a newspaper for interesting articles and then hypothesize what might that look like if you just ran with it and went really crazy with it.
I found an article was talking about post-traumatic stress disorder in which they were coming up with a drug to help people forget their stress. And I thought, what if the whole society
got addicted to that drug?
And what could a totalitarian government do with that kind of a population?
Yeah.
Everybody's taking drugs to forget, which is why we got the title Remember, because that is the antidote to forgetting.
And the story that grew out of that was a near-future dystopian sci-fi thriller about an enforcer for a future totalitarian state who takes memory-blocking drugs so that he won't remember that he is the one setting kids free and reuniting them with their parents. You wrote the script.
I wrote it. We created it together, but I did the typing, put it into a script.
Roughly, I think, 120 pages. That's a lot of blank pages that you have to write and fill, and that can be intimidating, but we didn't write a word of it until we had actually worked through the entire story.
We had a board in which we had sticky notes. We moved them around. We had different color coding for different arcs that are going on because you follow arcs of different characters, and how those characters' arcs intersect with each other was incredibly complicated, and you and I went on a lot of long walks.
Working through what happens next, how do we get them from here to here? Armed with a script, we set out to raise a budget. Crowdfunding being all the rage, we started a campaign on Indiegogo. We had no idea what we were doing, but we did our best, and at the end of the day, we had raised $5,000. We were thrilled. And most of that $5,000 budget went to craft services, helping some actors with gas, important props and costume pieces, and paying for the score. Which meant that most of the movie, actors, crew, locations, accommodation, etc., all had to be on a volunteer basis, which led to some interesting situations. Potentially the number one question I get about creating narrative low-budget films is, where do you find actors? And the answer is simple. Cast your friends. And I'm only half joking. In order to get actors, you need to know actors. Before sending out a casting call, we had been involved in a local acting community that just happened to be one of the largest passion plays in the world. Because of this, not only did we have a lot of actors as friends, because actors tend to know actors, we had access to all of their friends. And so we had almost no trouble filling all of our roles. As far as crew goes, our original plan was to keep it lean and mean. It would just be me and my dad. But 3 months before we planned to shoot, we met 4 sisters who just happened to be looking for an opportunity to volunteer on a film set, one of whom I would eventually get married to. And in the process of putting out casting calls, we attracted a few other volunteers who ended up being a tremendous help as well.
When we started making the film, it was either this is going to be God's project or we don't want to do it at all. So when we came to some hurdles that we had no idea how we're going to solve them, we just had to give them over to God and say, God, if you want this movie made, we need some help. The first one that comes to mind is for the children actors. We said, for costume, can you just please send your child in a white turtleneck? Well, it turns out there was no such thing as a white turtleneck in any store in Western Canada. We prayed on that, and we went into the Salvation Army thrift store, and hanging next to the cashier was a rack of over a dozen different sizes of children's turtlenecks, white turtlenecks, that were $1 a piece. What are the odds of that?
We were setting up for the shoot, and I just asked, so who's playing Jackson? And Greg was like, well, you can pray about that. We don't have an actor yet. And it was like about 10 minutes before we were ready to shoot. A previous actor who had auditioned and then backed out because he said he didn't have time came running, and he's like, hey, do you still need somebody? He's like, I got 2 hours.
You know, as a producer, one of my jobs is to find locations. And, you know, we check those off, check. Well, this one never got checked off. We needed a place for them to escape out of the jail. We needed a lobby in which there were certain hallways that came out the front door. We just could not find that location, and it was on the schedule to film the next morning. And during the night, the answer came to me that he's not going to go out the front door. He's going to go out a back door. And so we just inserted a little scene in which he gets to a map as he's escaping in the prison and does some things on it and says, the boiler room. And then he ends up escaping through the back, through the boiler room. An idea we had no idea of the night before.
So we got this building. It used to be an old school, and it was recently bought by a church, and they weren't using a lot of the rooms, so we were able to go through and like make it kind of how we wanted to. But that being said, there was also a lot of like junk left in some of the rooms. The day before the shoot, we were busy going through the junk piles in rooms and like putting them into places, going, well, this looks cool. This could be a printer.
But despite these and other hiccups, production went smoothly and was so much fun. But once shooting was wrapped and we had all the footage in the computer, then the real work began. The first thing to overcome was that my camera shot in the then brand new codec of H.264. Up to that point, I had been using Final Cut Pro 5. Final Cut Pro 10 had only just come out, and the reviews were vicious. Basically, nobody liked it, but it could handle H.264 natively. And with that, our movie became potentially the first feature film ever edited on Final Cut Pro 10. But I only realized it a few years after the fact when one of the editors from the TV show Heartland pointed it out to me. Oh well, cool piece of trivia, I guess. What Final Cut Pro 10 did do for us, though, was allow us to have a rough cut screening of the entire film 2 weeks after wrapping filming. At the time, that was virtually unheard of, and I was a believer. That would have been impossible in previous versions of Final Cut Pro. Final Cut Pro 10 was awesome, but despite the fast editing, there was a bigger problem. My plan was to keep the number of visual effects shots down to an absolute minimum. Visual effects, no matter how basic, take a lot of time and work. So my goal was to make those shots count and keep the number down, say, below 50. However, that number turned out to be a lot closer to 350. And for one guy, that was gonna be a lot of work. So I went online and asked for help, and pretty soon I had a team of 21 visual effects artists in 3 different countries. I have never sent so many emails in my entire life. I kid you not, one day I sent over 100 emails. We were also able to secure an up-and-coming composer who did an amazing job, in my opinion. And 11 months later, we had a premiere. And despite my computer going to sleep halfway through the movie and creating an impromptu intermission, it was a lot of fun. But we weren't really done yet, were we? We sent it to film festivals because that's what you're supposed to do to find distributors, right? Unfortunately, all the distribution offers were downright terrible. So we decided we would go it alone. Self-distribution. Here we come. This is one of those things that was really formative in convincing me how important marketing and understanding marketing is. Most filmmakers, most businesses, most people that try really big things, we hope that if we make a post, it will reach millions of people and they'll buy. And that really isn't how it works. And that was the fatal flaw. No marketing or distribution plan. We sold the movie on our own for years, getting mediocre results, which led to eventually giving the movie away to a distributor who got it placed in Walmart. And while that was exciting, we never saw a penny from them. And like I said at the beginning of the video, the film was received with mixed reviews. Some people couldn't get past the mistakes we'd made in production, of which there are many.
Sound, people. Sound. I just got an email the other day. Can you please improve the sound in that and redo it for us? No, it's not going to work like that. If you're going to invest money in anything, invest it in sound equipment.
So were we successful? Monetarily? Well, we made way more than our $5,000 back. So in one sense, I guess so, but in another, not really. But we did do what we set out to do. We made a movie, a sci-fi movie, something that we didn't think we could do, and on almost no budget.
I think a lot of it was just getting going, getting started, and getting moving.
Professionally, as a teacher, one of the things I learned early in my career was that if I wanted to try something, I couldn't wait until I had it perfected and then do it. I had to do it and then perfect it. And then we applied that directly to filmmaking. We were not ready to make a feature film, but we made a feature film.
It's getting moving with what you have. Like, I think it was good for Dallas to just try his first feature film and get out and see what he could do with what he had, rather than stressing out and trying to make sure everything's perfect and try to have this huge budget. And he just got moving with what he had, and God put the rest of the pieces together.
At the beginning of this video, I promised you that I would reveal to you the secret sauce that made making this movie possible. And this is it. We just started. And that might seem a little simple, but it's true. A lot of people actually know everything that you need in order to make a movie, because it's just like making, if you can make a 1 minute movie, you can make a two-hour movie, but there's some mental blocks, and sometimes you just need to see the path.
It's always easier to be learning if you're moving forward, as opposed to sitting in there and stressing and trying to get it all, and then, and then you can build on your lesson that you learned before.
And that's my encouragement to you. Don't wait till you're ready. Just do it.
And that is how we made a movie for $5,000. If you want to hear another crazy story, how about the time that I ran for political office and lost? Check out this video, and I'll see you there.